YouTube, how the ducky doing? The Films here, and if you're new to Marvel Rivals, maybe you're picking up Marvel Rivals after a little bit of a hiatus, or you've been playing for a while now, and you're just genuinely looking to widen your hero pool, then this is the perfect tier list video for you. I'm going to be breaking down all of the characters that are the most difficult to master to the easiest to master at a reasonable human level. So if you like what you see, or you just want to see more content from me in general, make sure to hit that like button. It greatly helps out the video and the channel, and make sure to subscribe. We're going for 20,000 subscribers before September, which is my birthday month, and I would love to hit that goal for my birthday. It'd be the best present ever. But regardless, I hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, just a quick little reminder, this video is all in my opinion, and you might have a different stance on what characters are the easiest or the hardest to learn, etc. Look, everybody is different, nobody is perfect, but this is just me if I were to pick up the game for the very first time, and I wish I had this. This is the list I wish I had. So just like all of my tier lists, we're going to be kicking things off with Doctor Strange, D Strange, the Master of Magic, whatever you want to call him. Now, Doctor Strange is heavily reliant on timings, when to TP, when not to TP, when to shield, things like that. There's a lot of niche tech that makes the character a little bit more difficult to master than some of the other vanguards in the game in comparison. But for the most part, he is a general vanguard that a lot of players should know how to play, especially if you're grinding the ranked ladder. You need to know how to play Strange just a little bit, get that TP in, get to the point, refight, pop off that ult. Although sometimes it might not be the perfect ult or the perfect damage, the perfect TP. As long as you know the core mechanics, a lot of people can pick up this character very easily. So for the most part, I think he sits relatively in the middle at the B tier. He's not the hardest to learn, he's not the easiest to learn, he's definitely just in the middle, and I think if you don't have Doctor Strange in your hero pool, you really do need to pick him up. I think he's a very crucial aspect, so you definitely pick him up. But in terms of, I would say he's in the middle between the easiest and the hardest. He's, average. Now, just a quick little reminder, S is the hardest to master, in my opinion, and D tier is like the easiest to master with filling in between. So for Hulk, next up, I would say Hulk is actually a rather difficult hero to master. I think he takes a lot of knowledge in the game of when to go into the backline. You need to know your timings and your cooldowns very effectively. And for the most part, there's not too many Hulk players that are extremely good at the character. You don't see very good Hulk players until about Celestial and up. Of course, you might be sitting in GM and like the best Hulk, ever. I'm sorry, but for the most part, you don't see extremely good Hulk players until Celestial, meaning that the character is harder to master. He does take more skill, more patience, more timing, when to use your cooldowns. His shield blocking Magneto ults or Iron Man ults is also a very crucial aspect. I think all of this has to go with timing, so I think he's going to be sitting in the S tier. I think he's probably one of, if not the hardest vanguard to learn, in my opinion. So I think that's fine putting him in S, but of course anybody can disagree in the comments down below. It's just a open tier list video, so just let me know what you think in the comments down below. But for the most part, I think he's probably one of the harder tanks to learn in the entire game, probably the most difficult to learn, so definitely S tier. Have the master of magnetism himself, Magneto. Now, Magneto is a very dominant vanguard. From the dawn of this game's existence, from Season 0 all the way to right now, Season 3.5, the character is extremely strong. And if you're looking to pick him up in the hero pool, definitely pick him up if you don't have a vanguard already. For the most part, the character is rather straightforward. There is some niche tech that is going to be super helpful to pick up when learning, just like Doctor Strange. Very niche tech that is pretty straightforward. With that being said, though, I don't think he's the hardest vanguard to master. I mean, there are some timings, some cooldowns you need to master to be able to play the character at a super high level. But if you're just picking him up to play, I don't think he's going to be hard in comparison to Hulk picking up the first time, or any other vanguard in the game. I think if you were to pick between Hulk, Magneto, you should always go with Magneto. But if you want to go the harder route, you go Hulk. For the most part, I think I've placed Magneto in the B tier. He's kind of on the same level as Doctor Strange. Yes, there is a lot of niche tech you need to know for Magneto to be super effective. You need to know how to aim, kind of, with Magneto, but I think he's a relatively straightforward character to learn. Now, moving on, we have Groot. Now, Groot is a character that definitely takes some understanding of the game, some high-level understanding. Not necessarily high-level. you need to know where to place your walls, especially with the new Mantis team up. You need to know where to place that healing wall so it's not easily destroyed, so you can get the maximum use out of it. I think the character does take aim. The character needs to have a good sense of aiming. You need to know how to aim with this character, especially with his primary attack. That's a given. I think knowing when and where to use your walls is also a crucial factor. I don't think it's a character like Magneto, like Doctor Strange, you can just pick up and be insanely good at right away. But I don't think he's a character that is on the same, difficulty level as Hulk. For the most part, he sits in between Hulk and Doctor Strange Magneto tier, so he's going to be looking at the A tier in my opinion. I think he's a little bit harder to master than in his counterparts of Doctor Strange and Magneto. So I think A is relatively good. You also need to be considering if you're playing into your counters, your known counters like Punisher, Wolverine, Psylocke, etc. Things that will completely shred you down. If you can play Groot against those characters, you're doing extremely well. But again, he's on the harder scale of the Vanguards to learn in comparison to, Magneto, Doctor Strange. These are the standout, so I think A is perfectly fine for him. When it comes to Peni Parker, I don't think Peni Parker is particularly hard to learn. Although there are a lot of lineups for the character to learn, yes, that is true. But the thing is with this character is the character is rather straightforward. However, the character is also a very situational character. There's certain circumstances where the character will shine when played correctly, and there's other circumstances where the character will get completely shut down. That being said, the character isn't difficult to play. You set up, you place your spider generator, whatever your spider nest, and you kind of play around it. You're kind of a stationary character, which is a little underwhelming in comparison to Hulk, Groot. I think in terms of difficulty to master, I think it sits around the B tier, in my personal opinion. Again, when I make tier lists, left to right does not matter. I think Peni is on the same level of Magneto, Doctor Strange. Maybe it takes a little bit more understanding, a little bit more depth than Doctor Strange and Magneto, so that is something to consider when you're trying to pick up Peni Parker. That's, of course, in my opinion, but I think that is the right take. I think the character is straightforward to learn, does take a little bit more time in comparison to Doctor Strange and Magneto, but I don't think she is as hard to learn as Groot or Hulk, for instance. Moving on from Peni Parker, we come to Captain America. Now, Captain America, I think, is a character that is relatively hard to learn, in my opinion, because a lot of the time it's all about positioning, how long you can stay in the enemy team's backline, how annoying you can be. There's a lot of animation cancels you need to know to be able to play this character at a high level that some people might not fully grasp. Even I don't fully grasp how to do it perfectly, the animation cancels with the damage, even though you just run. I don't know, something my brain just doesn't click with this character. That being said, I don't think he's on the same tier as Hulk. I think he sits kind of with Groot. I think at the A tier, I think he's a little bit more advanced than Magneto, Doctor Strange, and Peni Parker, for instance. But I don't think he is as hard as Hulk. Hulk, hands down, probably the hardest thing to learn. But yeah, I think Captain America sitting at A tier is perfectly fine. You could argue to maybe move him up or move him down. Again, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. This is just in my opinion. For whatever reason, I feel Venom is super hard to learn. Look, there's just something wrong with me. For the love of me, I can't swing. The one-shot combo does take practice, a lot of practice. The wall running, in my opinion, takes a lot of practice. I can never do it smoothly. Like, I suck at it. Even with Spider-Man, you do not want to see my Spider-Man gameplay. It is the worst gameplay I've ever seen in my entire life. And if I play this character on stream or in a video, it actually does nuke my channel. It's like, I don't know, it's this pure comedy. But for the most part, I think the character is kind of S level. SA. I think to play the character at an extremely high level, extremely well, does take a lot of practice and a lot of skill. You could argue for A, but I think for me personally, I see him as an S tier because it's in my opinion. So I think S tier is fine if you're trying to pick up a character. So I think if you have a good understanding of Venom, If you have a good understanding of the S tier, difficulty, the master characters, in theory, you will have a good understanding of the rest of the characters because you get the hardest characters out of the way, have them learned. Relatively, all the characters will feel pretty similar, pretty easy to you after that. But I think Venom, in my opinion, is on the S tier category. So moving on to Thong, or the Thing, aka the Boulder. Now, he is a rather straightforward character. You punch. That's really about it. You just right click. You might think, oh, you do other tech. Well, yeah, that's true, but for the most part, you're just spamming right click to get that 50% health, that 50% shield. You run at people, you run to the back line, and then you jump out. That's the whole gameplay loop. For the most part, it doesn't take too much skill to understand how to play the character. I think when it comes to Vanguards, you have to have a decent understanding of how the game is played to be able to play them at a high level. I think sitting in B tier is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then for Emma Frost, I think Emma Frost is honest. I guess B tier. I want to put her C, or I could even put Thing C, because she's just straightforward. You hold down left click, you press E every here and there, you press shift to go immune, you grab somebody, you kick them into the wall, and then you swap out a diamond form and you go back to holding left click. Yes, there's some minor tech you can do, animation cancels, shielding, Iron Man ults, Meteor M ults, or Mag ults. I think, yes, those are all niche techs and niche tips that you should know when you're playing this character. But I don't think the character is hard to master or the hardest to learn. I think kind of in the middle. It will take some games. It will take a few games, not a few days, to really have a good understanding of this character. Whereas characters like Hulk, Venom, Groot, Captain America, it might take more than a few games. It might take a few days for those characters. But I think in terms of Emma Frost and Thing, it takes like 2 games and you have a decent understanding of how the character should be played. Oh, I forgot Thor. I think Thor, honestly, he does take skill to learn. I truly do. I think he takes a lot of skill to learn. In terms of combos, animation cancels. I don't think the character is particularly good right now. Is it weird that I think the character should be like A or S? A or S? I feel like Hulk Venom is so much harder to learn than Thor. But I feel like Thor is still relatively hard to learn. I'll put an A right now. We can talk in the comments. A or S, in my opinion, for Thor to get a good learning or a good understanding of this character. I don't even know how to play Thor perfectly, in my opinion. I think A is fine, in my opinion. But now, moving on to Black Panther in our duelist section. For Black Panther it definitely takes time learning. I don't think anybody can just pick up the character and be extremely good at it. I think it'll take a few games, maybe take a day to really get a good understanding of his kit, how to play him, how to position. Yes, the changes to him did hurt him. Yes, whatever. But we're just talking about difficulty to master. I think for the most part, the character is A. I don't think he's as hard as like a Spiderman, a Psylocke, or a Magik, or things like that. I think he sits at A. He can be picked up. It would take a couple games, maybe a day, to learn. Whereas a character like Spider-Man, it might take more than 1 day. It might take a week or something to really get a good grasp and understanding of this character. So I think for Black Panther, putting him in the A tier is fine, in my opinion. But A is fine. Next up, we have Black Widow. Now, Black Widow is one of those characters that's just a point-and-click character, essentially. And what I mean by that is you right-click or, left trigger or whatever to aim, and then you shoot. I think the character is very straightforward to learn if you've played Widowmaker from Overwatch, if you're swapping over, or you're playing a character that was some type of sniper in any other video game. I think Black Widow is an easy transfer of skills. That being said, she is a character that takes good aim to be extremely effective with, although you can just body shot and do whatever. I think the character is more reliant on individual skill with aiming more than anything else. So I don't think she's particularly hard to learn, mainly due to the fact that you just need decent aim. that could be a hot take, but I think characters that are hit scan characters in most video games just take good aim to, learn. So I think putting her in B is fine. Vice versa, I think Hawkeye, on the counterpart, does take a little bit more skill to learn than Black Widow or other hit scan characters, because he isn't a hit scan character. You have to kind of lead your shots in a way. You have to pre-charge arrows to be super effective. He is more successful to dives because he only has shift, which is pretty easy to dive onto him after he uses the shift. I think the character does take more skill, in my opinion, than Black Widow. So that's what I think. So I think putting him A is fine. Now, moving on from Hawkeye to Hela, it's in the same similar boat, in my opinion, like Black Widow, where the character is heavily reliant on raw individual mechanical skill with aiming. But I do think playing Hela to a high level, when you're mastering the character, you have to have good mechanical skill. That's a must in the straight, like the top priority is good mechanical skill. Following that, I think you have to have a decent, good understanding of the game, positioning, when to flank, when to take off angles, when to be in your backline. I think that takes a little bit more skill than, say, a Black Widow, because the Black Widow can usually hang around from the mid-range to the long range in the back, whereas Hela has to take a lot more off angles than a Black Widow, per se, and go for those more riskier plays. You need to know when to use the cooldown of the bird at the right moment so that you have enough time to reposition, get back to your team. So I think in terms of difficulty master, I think she's a little bit more difficult to master than a Black Widow, because I think she's more reliant on positioning, and you have to have a very good mechanical skill, of course, as well, like I've been saying. But I think she sits kind of on the similar tier on A in terms of skill and mechanics. So I think A is fine. Now moving on to Cheaper Town Hall, aka Iron Fist. I don't think this character is hard to master or hard to really learn at all. I think you can get away with playing maybe 3 games of getting a good understanding to play the character, when to block, when to use the kick. I just don't think the character is in a really good spot right now currently. That being said, I think the character has a lot of... you can get away with a lot of things. You can mess up a dive and get away with living because just how mobile the character is, how livable the character is. Even if you mess up your parry, yes, you're out of the parry, but you should be able to get out of the fight in a second because of the kick. I think putting him in C tier in terms of how to learn the character, like the difficulty, is fine, in my opinion. I think it's a character you can easily pick up. A couple games, you should be good. If not, there might be some issues arising, but for the most part, it's a pretty easy character to grasp. Doesn't take a whole lot of mechanical skill in comparison to the hit scan heroes or the hit scan duelists. So I think putting it in C or putting him in C is perfectly fine in my opinion. Moving on to Iron Man. Now, Iron Man kind of in the similar boat as a lot of the characters that are rather straightforward. It's all about the mechanical skill with tracking, with the right click, with the beam. For the most part, straightforward character, not too much to know. There's a little movement you have to understand, going in a circular motion up and down. That's really about it. I think it sits around the B tier in terms of difficulty to master. I think it's a character you play like 1 game and you got a good, decent understanding of how the character is supposed to be played. So I don't think it's too hard, but I put him in B instead of, C tier because he does take a little bit more mechanical skill with tracking than comparison to an Iron Fist, because he does kind of have a little bit of a lock on Iron Fist. So I think putting Iron Man in B is fine. I think he's an average skill level. It takes an average player to play and definitely can be perfected to be super effective in high elo and really dominate. Where in comparison to Iron Man, you have a character like Magik. Now, Magik, in my opinion, takes a lot of skill to learn. There's a lot of animation characters. The meta currently doesn't favor her, but the character can still do an insane amount of damage, live forever, and I think it takes a lot to have a good understanding of how to use the character extremely well. There's not that many insanely good Magik players right now, besides because the meta is not favoring her. But in terms, like, she is hard to learn in my opinion. I still haven't learned her fully. I still don't get a lot of the combos and the animation cancels, even though the animation cancel is pretty straightforward. But in my opinion, I think she is on the harder end of the spectrum of how to learn heroes in this game. So after Magik, we come to Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight, in my opinion, I don't think he's a hard character to learn whatsoever. The only thing you have to understand is like a one combo, and that's left click E, right click or whatever, or you left click, right click, animation cancel E, left click. Look, it sounds confusing, but it's really straightforward. You just throw an Ankh, throw your E on the ground, and shoot at it. That's really about it. The enemies are clumped up together. Oh, just left click and right click. Look, there's going to be some niche tech, yes. I don't think he's a hard character master. I think one game in your set, maybe half a game in your set, I think putting him on the lower end is perfectly fine in my opinion. Because I feel like anybody, regardless if you're a strategist main, you're a Vanguard main, can easily pick up and understand how to play the character after one match of a quick play match or a bot lobby, anything like that. The practice range, for instance. Just play him in the practice range, you have a good understanding of how the kit is used. So I think putting him in the D tier is fine in terms of how easy the character is to learn and understand. So Namor, I think Namor does take quite a bit of skill in my opinion. And you might be thinking, why? He has auto-aiming turrets, auto-aiming robots, auto-aiming squids, whatever you want to call it. Yes, that certainly is true, but the character is a flanking duelist. Believe it or not, nobody still sometimes understands that this character is meant to flank. You flank the enemy, you throw your squids on the wall, then you go for a right click or you go for a headshot to enable the squids to do a ton of burst damage onto the enemy. Because this character is a flanking duelist, in my opinion, it takes a little bit more understanding of the game to really pull off a flank and be super successful with this character. Yes, the ultimate is straightforward with a damage boost Luna. Yes, the character is straightforward because it takes a little bit of aim and your squids do all the work. Yes, that is all certainly true. But I think besides the mechanical portion of this character, the mechanical skill of aiming, I think understanding how the map flows, understanding how to position with the character is a lot more valuable than the mechanical raw factor. So I think putting this character on the tier of A, with difficulty to master with the Hela, is perfectly fine because they're also kind of doing the same thing. They're off-angling, they're flanking. You need a little bit more depth in the game to get a full grasp with this character, in my personal opinion. So I think he's a little bit harder, but he's not like a S tier character. I think maybe 3 games, maybe a day, you'll have a better understanding of how to play this character fully. And if you don't know how to play the character fully, I have some guides from quite a while ago that still apply to this character. So if you want to check out those guides, make sure to check them out. I'll have a playlist for all the guides in the comments down below or in the description. But I think in terms of how to master this character, I think A is perfectly fine. Psylocke. Now, Psylocke is a rather straightforward character, again, in my opinion. The character has a lot of mechanical skill with aiming, I would say, for the most part. I think the character does have a lot of get out of jail free cards with the shift, with the Invis. I think it's another character that boils down to positioning, how to pace yourself, how to position yourself, when to flank, when not to flank, when to dive, when not to dive. I think in terms of a mechanical level, I think mechanical level is about an A, but when you add the factor of positioning to the game and the play style, I think it comes up to the S tier because I think positioning is the biggest factor when it comes to a character like Psylocke. Mechanical skill isn't necessarily demanding. I think the true strengths from this character is positioning. That's what you need to do to master this character, is positioning, where to position. Are you positioning high ground, low ground? Are you spacing yourself far enough from the enemy on your team so you don't get instantly deleted when you go for a dive? So I think putting her in S is fine in my opinion, because I think she relies more on positioning rather than anything. I know I said positioning like 20 times, but that's just what I think. Moving on, we have Punisher. And I don't think Punisher is hard to learn at all, really. It's just you hold W and you hold left click for the most part. That's really about it. I think the only character is this mechanical skill. That's it. I don't think positioning is a major factor because you're not necessarily ever going to off angle as a Punisher. If you are, that's kind of strange, but for the most part, you're sitting behind your vanguards in front of your strategist, just holding down left click, shooting at people. So I don't think the character is too demanding in terms of positioning or skill wise. I think the only thing you have to understand is like when I'm Magneto ults, just don't shoot or shoot while you're bubbled so you can instantly break his meteor. I think that's really the biggest technicalities you need to learn. Or you use your turret form when the Eye of Agamotto is going off, or when Emma Frost is ulting, so you're CC immune. I think those are the only things you have to consider. So for the most part, I think the character is straightforward. I think relatively same like ease level as C tier. I think it'll take half a game, maybe one game, to get a good understanding of how to play Punisher for the most part. So again, pretty straightforward. So moving on to Scarlet Witch. I don't think this character is hard to learn at all. I think it's on the D tier. You just like hold down left click and right click. There's some niche tech you can do with the character, but for the most part, words are hard. Pretty straightforward character. You're just holding down left click for the majority of the time. People can argue that, yeah, it takes some skill with the right click, it takes some skill with the E, it takes some skill with the ult of when to use it, when not to use it. Sure, but the character, you're not really off-angling with this character. I mean, if you are, sometimes you get some value, sometimes you don't. So I think in terms of mechanical and positioning, not necessarily demanding character, so I think D is perfectly fine. I'm not saying Scarlet Witch players are bad. I'm not saying any player is bad. I'm saying in terms of difficulty master, I think D is fine. So moving on to Squirrel Girl. I don't think Squirrel Girl is necessarily a demanding character. It's like Squirrel Girl best reminds me of Demo Man from TF2, in my opinion. I don't know why, but this reminds me of it so much. Like with the normal grenade launcher and using the sticky jumper as a second, you're jumping around, hitting air shots on people. That's kind of like what Squirrel Girl reminds me of. I don't know why. You could say Junkrat. I mean, yeah, that's a perfectly fine take, but I see Demo Man more in her than anything else. I don't think she's too demanding for the most part. She does a ton of damage. She can be played extremely well. There's some niche tech where it's like the double stun, not hard to do at all. I think she's a little bit harder, in my opinion, than Punisher and Iron Fist, which is kind of crazy. But I think because it's a projectile-based character, and if you're going for direct hits, it takes a little bit more skill because it's not a hit scan character. Hit scan characters, in my opinion, take a little less skill because it all boils down to mechanical skill. You're not really off-angling a Squirrel Girl sometimes. You're not really, doing anything crazy with the character. I think putting her on the tier list of B, honestly, in my opinion, is fine. In terms of, I think it'll take 1 or 2 games to get extremely good at the character. Whereas like an Iron Fist or these 4 characters and seeing D tier take half a game, maybe just sitting in the practice range a little bit, messing around. Kind of is like where those characters are at. But I think this character takes a little bit more skill, mainly because she is a projectile-based character. Yes, the projectiles are massive, but I think it does take just a tad bit more skill in my opinion. Now, unless we come to Starlord. Now, Starlord isn't necessarily a demanding character in my opinion. I mean, in terms of like being down here, I think I put him in the same boat of these characters in A tier. I don't think he's particularly extremely hard to master like S tier characters. I think he's pretty straightforward, a lot of mechanical skill demanding with aiming. When to use abilities, you can do iframes on certain characters, but for the most part, he's a rather straightforward character of this raw mechanical aim with some movement tech, yes. So, I think I put Starlord in A. I think that's fine for me. Moving on to Storm. I don't think Storm is too demanding of a character to learn. It doesn't take too much mechanical skill, in my opinion, with aiming. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is when to use what form, what is the most optimal way to use it. I think you need a little bit more understanding of the character than, Punisher, Iron Fist, Moon Knight, Scarlet Witch, because these characters straightforward. Come on, be honest with me. These characters are straightforward for the most part. You're shooting, holding left click, holding a left click, throwing one ability plus your left click. Again, one ability and your left click. Storm is a little bit interesting because while it is, one ability and left click, you are a flying hero. I think flying heroes demand a little bit more mastery or difficulty to master because you have to keep in mind that you're a big target, have to move around a lot. So I think putting her B honestly is fine in terms of mastery level. And I think again, maybe 2-3 games and you've got the character, good. And that's about it. Now, Winter Soldier. I don't think Winter Soldier is hard to learn at all. I think the character is straightforward. Shooting, pressing E. I think the only niche tech is hooking and doing a 180 spin, knocking up the target into your team. I think that is the biggest thing to make the character extremely good or bad. I don't think he's on the tier list of A. I cannot put him C and D because he acts a little bit differently than these characters. I think putting him in the tier list of B in terms of difficulty to master is perfectly fine. I love Winter Soldier. He's probably like my favorite character in the game, like realistically speaking. I think he does take skill to learn, have a good understanding of who to hook, what to do. That's really about it. I think putting him in B is good. You need mechanical skill. Even though he is a little bit of a projectile character, for the most part, he's pretty lenient on the mechanical side because explosive shots do hit targets relatively largely. So you have some leniency with that, but I think putting him in B tier is fine. Fantastic, in my opinion, I think he does take a decent amount of skill. Realistically speaking, if you want to use your cooldowns right. I've seen a lot of Mr. Fantastic players do absolutely horrible, but I've also seen other Fantastic players do extremely well. And I think you have to have a good understanding of how the character is played to do a lot on the character. I genuinely think in terms of mastering this character, getting a full good understanding of this character, getting good stats on this character every game, I think he is an A tier character, like realistically. Yes, you're pressing left click or you're pressing your right trigger or whatever and spinning your camera around. Yes, that certainly is part of the character's kit, which is pretty funny because he has cleave. But I think putting him on the A tier is actually fine because I think you have to have a deep knowledge of the character to be super effective with him. That being said, you have to have a deep knowledge for every character to be super effective with them. I think Mr. Fantastic demands a lot of when to use the different forms, when not to use the different forms, when to use your shift or your rectangle form is what I like to call it, your Pop-Tart form, also another thing I like to call. I think those are the biggest factors: when to have charge, when to deflate, when to inflate. I think those are all crucial factors, and I think Mr. Fantastic does demand a couple days, not one game, not 2 games, not sitting in the training round. I think it takes 1 or 2 days to get a full good understanding of the character. So I think in terms of mastery, I think we put him in the A tier. I don't see him at S tier. I don't see him on par of Magik, Psylocke, Hulk, Venom. So I think putting him on A is fine in my opinion. Now, Human Torch. I think Human Torch is S. Now, hear me out. The character, look, a lot of people can play Torch. Don't get me wrong. You're flying around, you're moving around, you're shooting. Yes, there's a lot of tech though with the character that the character demands to be extremely effective with it. There are decent level Human Torch players in Celestial, GM, Diamond that do well, but they're not doing certain tech, whether it's animation cancels, whether it's the movement. The movement is a major thing in my opinion with this character, and that is moving left to right or in a circular motion up and down all at the same time, so you're impossible to hit. Like, an extremely good Human Torch should never be dying in the air, essentially, which is kind of crazy because he is so nimble. He can dodge everything. It's like Neo from the Matrix dodging bullets left and right in slow-mo. Like, that's what the character should be played like, and I think the character is actually hard to master. I put a lot of time into the character, personally. It took me a week really to get a full good understanding. And it's a character like you have to play consistently to maintain the mastery on this character. So I think putting him in S is fine, in my opinion. I think he's a harder character to learn than some of these other characters, again, which is fine. Moving on, we come to Spider-Man. Look, I'm putting Spider-Man S. He's a character that you have to consistently play to be very good at the character. I think the character demands a lot. Even though everybody hates him or whatever, or everybody thinks Spider-Man players do nothing, in reality, they are very hard. The character is very hard to learn, in my opinion. I am completely terrible at this character. I don't think you want to see me play this character. There has been horror stories of me playing this character, not for the enemies, but for my own team. Out of respect of my teammates, I don't pick this character in many of my games. I think he takes a lot of skill, a lot of patience, a lot of practice. There's a lot of combos to do. There's aiming required to, grab people off the map. Like, you do have to understand how to aim with the character. That is a must. You have to understand when to go in, when to get out, how to use your cooldowns properly to do the most amount of damage, always applying the marks to do extra damage. I think the character demands a lot. It takes quite a lot to understand and master the character. I don't think you can pick the character up in a day unless you're some prodigy. I think it takes you, a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, so and so. I put quite a lot of time onto Spider-Man. A week, still don't understand the character. Never will, so never picking up the character. So I think he sits on S tier. He is harder for players to pick up if you're coming into the game for the very first time. You don't have a good understanding of the characters. Definitely on the harder end, but if you do learn Spider-Man first, and then you start trickling down, the characters get easier and easier to learn. So that's one way to think of Phoenix and Blade, the newest additions in Marvel Rivals in Season 3. Phoenix, in my opinion, kind of similar boat as Hela Hawkeye, sitting A tier. Hit scan hero that does take a lot of off angles. You need to have good positioning with the character to be super effective with the character, in my opinion. So I think putting her in the A tier is fine. Whereas Blade, I don't think Blade is particularly hard to understand what the kid does. The thing is, the character, unfortunately, is just not good. The character is not good. I think once the character gets somewhat of a buff, then more people will pick him up. The character will become a little more popular. People might start looking at this tier list video and saying, oh, the character is not too hard to pick up. Maybe I should pick up the character. I think the character, for what it is decently hard, right? I don't think he's extremely hard like AS, but I think B is fine. I don't think he's hard to pick up. It's just he's not particularly good to play right now. Then the last character, Wolverine, or our last duelist, I think Wolverine sits at A tier. I think he does take some good understanding of the character in the game to be able to play Wolverine at a high level. People can relatively pick up the character, hold left click, and run at the vanguards. Yes, you can certainly do that. But for the most part, I do think he takes some skill. A lot of times, even right now, I still miss grabs with the shift. Let's be honest. We all do that, even if you're a one-trick. We've missed grabs before. Can't deny that. But I do think he takes a little bit more skill than some of the characters in the B tier. Like Squirrel Girl, like Winter Soldier, like Black Widow, honestly, because Black Widow is purely mechanical skill. So I think putting Wolverine in the A tier of mastery or difficulty is perfectly fine in my opinion. With Adam Warlock first, I don't think Adam Warlock is insanely hard. I think there are some things to consider when playing this character. When to use Soul Bond, when to snap, how to aim. He is a mechanically demanding character, but I don't think he is on an S tier level of mastery. So I think A is fine. I can't put him B because he does demand more time to master, so I think A is fine. But once you get the Soul Bond part out of the way, I think the character is relatively easy to understand. Now moving on, Cloak and Dagger. Now this is interesting to me. People say Cloak and Dagger players are boosted, whatever, the stereotype. I think the character is a little bit more demanding than the B tier in my opinion. I think how to min-max your abilities is a lot more crucial than this raw aiming, even though the character has auto aim. I think when and where to use certain abilities is a crucial aspect to get the maximum healing output, how to do the most damage with the character, things like that. I don't think this character is a B tier character. In my heart. This character is A in terms of mastery because of the min-maxing of abilities. He's They are a very micro-dependent character. There's a lot of micro abilities you have to keep in mind, swapping forms, doing things like that. Whereas in comparison, I don't think JOFF is a demanding character because for the most part, you're just holding left click. I think this character is a C tier at best in terms of difficulty to master. But when I think of a character like Loki, relatively straightforward strategist in my opinion. The biggest things is cooldown rotation and how to position as the character. I think those are the biggest factors when it comes to this character. And I think you have to have a very good understanding of how to position, when to use your regeneration domain ability, which is the shift ability, how to do more damage, how to heal at the same time, how to be super effective with this character. I think this character is an S tier difficulty level hero to completely master and get a good understanding of depth and knowledge on, because how positionally heavy this character is. I think they are an S tier character because if you don't know how to position well with this character, you won't have a ton of healing. You will probably die a lot. You won't have the best damage. And I think the character, and once you master the positioning aspect of this character, the character just becomes a lot easier. I think knowing when and where to use the rune ability is also a big important factor because it's such a big heavy cooldown, super important ability. So I think putting him in the S tier category in terms of strategist is perfectly fine in terms of how to master. Following that is Luna. And I don't think Luna is hard to master in comparison to a Cloak and Dagger. Because, hold on, before you type in the comments, Luna is mechanically demanding. You need to have good aim. That's really about it. If you have good aim, you can get a ton of healing output. Whereas Cloak and Dagger, you need to know how to use your abilities properly to, get a ton of healing impact, do a lot for your team. Whereas Luna, you literally just hold left click and have good mechanical skill. Yes, mechanical skill is hard to come by sometimes. You gotta either, practice the character a lot, do aim training, do whatever. But I don't think they're relatively hard to play. Because the character just relies on aim, not too much. People are critical, you start using your clap, and that's really about it. Yes, you can snowflake people when to ult, yes, but I think the character that's more demanding is Cloak and Dagger because there are more things to consider than just Luna. But that's my opinion. Moving on, we have Mantis, and I think Mantis is on that A tier difficulty with the Adam Warlock. You have to land a lot of headshots, so you have to have some decent mechanical skill. You need to know when and where to use your leaves, when to heal, when to damage boost. Big things to consider. Always rotating, always keeping one leaf up is a big thing. So I think putting her A tier of terms of how to master a character, definitely put her A tier in my opinion. Can't be B tier. So I think A tier is fine. Rocket's on the lower end. I think Rocket is a C tier difficult to master character. I don't think the character is demanding too much. You've seen people no damage Rocket get all the way up to top 500. You see all damage Rocket get up to top 500. So the character doesn't demand too much. The only thing you really have to do is move around your respawn beacon and move around your ult. Those are the biggest things to consider. And your positioning far back, holding right click. Character isn't demanding, but I think it'll take maybe one game, half a game to really get a good grasp of the character before anything. So I think putting C is fine. Now moving on to Ultron and Invisible Woman before we round out this video. I think Ultron is definitely more mechanical demanding than a Luna because you have to incorporate flying where it's like, oh, you put, Storm B tier. Well, it's a little bit different because you have to move the drone around. To shoot, you have to know when to use your ultimate for the right circumstance, whether it's going for damage or healing up your team. Those are big factors. I think that's the only aspect that makes the character definitely more challenging to master, that aspect. Following that, we have Invisible Woman. I don't think Invisible Woman is too demanding for the most part. I think, less positioning based. I think if you get really good with the management of the shield is a big factor. I think putting her in A above Luna. Look, it looks crazy, this tier list, but this is mastery difficulty, tier list. So I think putting her A is fine because she is not necessarily as demanding as Luna in terms of mechanical skill. Again, Luna is all mechanical aim based. It's just not determined whether the character is the best or the worst. Look, Snow is probably the best character in the entire game. But Invisible Woman is a little bit more demanding than Luna because you have to manage a lot more things, in my personal opinion. So it might take some more time to get a good grasp of the character. That's kind of how I look at this tier list. What takes longer to grasp? How many more abilities do you have to micro manage? Those are all factors when I look at what the difficulty is to master these characters. But regardless, that has been today's video. Hopefully this gives you a good understanding of how to open up your hero pool, make it a lot better, add some additions, maybe change your view onto what characters you might want to pick up next. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you agree with this tier list, maybe you don't. Look, this is all opinion based, which is perfectly fine. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, or let me know what character you're learning next as well in the comments down below. But regardless, I hope you have a great and safe day, and I'll catch you in the next one.